This week, we're going to start looking at the history of video art and who some of those early pioneers were. On Blackboard, you have this PowerPoint if you want to be able to look at anything from the PowerPoint, and you also have links to several videos that I'd like you to look at. So at certain points, I'm going to say, I'd like you to pause this and go and watch that video on Blackboard and then come back. So early video artists often were making work that was a critique of the media. And when I say media, I mean all forms of communication, such, as we were getting our news or entertainment, education, so on and so forth. In particular, it was the medium of television that they were really critiquing. And the question is, why? Well, let's look at the time period a little bit. So previously, in the 50s, okay, so video art comes about, it starts in the 1960s. And so 60s through early 70s, these are really considered the early pioneers of video art. So previously in the 50s, 66% of American households had TV sets. By 1960, 90% did. So this increase in television sets in American households really starts to change family dynamic and also our relationship to what we're seeing on the television. When video is introduced as a form of capturing media, and so that's what we're starting to see on the TV, when video is introduced, now people can start to see things that are in real time. So this wasn't possible before. There was no waiting for film, which has a chemical process. So for the first time, people are seeing live presidential debates. Previously, you would either have to be there, you would hear it on the radio, or if you wanted to see it, you'd be seeing it about a week late. So they're seeing live events, and some of those are bad, like the John F. Kennedy assassination or Martin Luther King assassination. But some are fantastic, like you get to see the Beatles, even if you couldn't afford to get the ticket or your parents didn't let you go. You're also seeing protests for the first time. So once video is introduced to television as a form of capturing information and disseminating the information, it really changes how people are seeing this household TV set. So previously, TV was behind newspaper. Newspaper was like the hot form of communication, and that's because it could be live. But lots of things happened with film, which was what was used before, because it would get damaged or editing or so on and so forth. So this sense of video really brought TV to the present tense. And this becomes incredibly enticing. So people start to feel almost what I call a fake intimacy with the TV. It feels like you're right there. So you're getting to see the Beatles live. It feels like when the camera is pointing right at, one of their faces, it looks like they're looking at you, one of their faces, meaning like one of the Beatles. People are looking right at you. When you're there involved in you're seeing a protest, you feel like you're part of it. So it gives this sense of like involvement, newness, immediacy, like you get to see things that are happening immediately. It like makes this kind of emotional bond that was never there before. If it was there, it was with radio. It certainly wasn't with the TV. So video makes this kind of emotional kind of commitment and bond with the TV that didn't exist before. And it builds this kind of fake intimacy. And fake intimacy meaning because a lot of the times you believed that things were marketed to you personally. And of course, it's not to you personally. But that's how the first marketing worked. And the first television shows, it's all trying to speak to you personally. So at this point, I'd like you to pause and watch this Coca-Cola commercial. See if it'll just pop up here. It's only about 30 seconds long. Oh, I have a thing that comes up first. So I'd like you to watch the Coca-Cola commercial and then come back. Okay, so what happened in this commercial here? Who's she talking to? She's talking to you. She's talking to you like you're her best friend who just suddenly showed up in her house like, oh, golly gee, I didn't see you there. There you are in my house. And so she's talking to you personally. The advertisers are really taking advantage of this like believed intimacy, that like you could reach into someone else's home and that you could be saying something and it was honest. And now we know what she's saying is not really honest. Is any of this true? What she's saying about like you can have a Coke and it has less calories, fewer calories than in a half a grapefruit, and that this is like perfect for watching your waist. None of it was true. But so people are incredibly gullible in the 60s. They're watching these things and they believe that pretty much everything they're seeing is true. And they get very invested in this culture. And so we also have this culture of sitcoms where even if it is representing kind of, superheroes or strange sort of characters, we have Bewitched, it's all representing like one kind of person and one stereotype of what a family should look like, even if we're talking about the Jetsons. Um, so it's very kind of controlling and very limited. And so this is what a lot of these artists were reacting against. Like, why are we having just this one way conversation of one type of family, one type of structure? We don't get to be engaged in this conversation. It's not a conversation. You're acting like it's a conversation. You're acting like, oh, hello there. You just came into my house. You're acting like I'm there, but I'm not really there. Maybe a little bit like this video right now. Okay, so along comes Marshall McLuhan, and he's a literary critic and theorist. So he writes and he's a thinker and he gets people to think about things and criticize things. And he comes along and he comes with this message, take back the medium. And the medium is television. The medium is the message, is his slogan. He's telling people, wake up. Stop just sitting in front of this, as my grandmother would call it, boob tube, and just absorbing all of this information and start paying attention and getting engaged and having a voice and getting your voice out there. So take back this medium. And this was really the birth of cable television. So we have the first artists who are involved in video and they start making their own channels. And this is presented on cable television. And so they're really interested in making their own kind of TV shows, not just having to show like the white picket fence and like the perfect family or the even the perfect superheroes or anyone, but kind of changing the dialogue, changing what we see on there. And so these were a lot of the original artists who were coming from other mediums, like maybe they were painters or they were sculptors, and they just found like they couldn't really engage in what was going on in the 60s in any kind of meaningful way unless they were working with video. It allowed them to kind of have a more meaningful, almost political, but kind of activist art take in the art world. So this is a quote that he wrote. This is a quote from Marshall McLuhan that I think is kind of interesting and still relevant today. So he writes, ours is the first age in which many thousands of best trained individual minds have made it a full-time business to get inside the collective public mind. So that's what we're still doing now, right? He's talking about advertising of every sort. I mean, it's not just advertising, it's how even news works. Like what they're interested in is getting inside the collective mind. How do people think? So you can program things for that. Okay. To get inside in order to manipulate, exploit, control is the object now. And to generate heat, not light, is the intention. So to get people excited, but not necessarily informed, that would be the light. To keep everybody in the helpless state engendered by prolonged mental rutting is the effect of many ads and much entertainment alike. Okay, so this is the way he's seeing this shift of what's happening in media and our culture as an influence or as a result of sort of increased media in all of the homes. And he's encouraging people to go and to fight back, to become part of the process, to enter into the communication, become co-producers of this communication product, right? So we have artists doing things like putting out manuals, teaching people how to work with video so that they could get out there and they could be part of this communication process. So they were educators, so to speak, as well. And so I think to understand this fully, we should think about what's going on in the 1960s. Now, if we were in the classroom, I'd ask you, and I know you guys would respond, and you tell me everything. You tell me all about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. and all of the things that are happening. But in the 60s is this incredible time period where we have a lot of people besides, I think everyone always thinks of like the hippies and the war protests, but we have a lot of people who have been feeling marginalized. And for the first time, they're really standing up and saying, we want a place at the table. We want to be considered equal. We don't want to just have to be part of this big system here, where we're put off to the side. So you have the people protesting the war, but you have women's rights, you have gay rights, you have all kinds of rights. As you can see here from all of these different images that I have here of people standing up and saying, we want our voice to be heard. So this was happening also in the art world. I mean, art doesn't happen in an art historical bubble. It's happening in relationship to what's going on in the world. And so you have this all this environment of people saying we want our voices heard. And so it's really natural that this was happening in the art world as well. And video was really a natural medium to be able to take back that communication and have your voice heard. All right, I'm going to stop this video here. And next, I'd like you to look at the video for Ant Farm, and I'm going to talk about that piece next.